So let's now ask what bees are good for from the point of view of flowers. Well, flowers are sex organs designed by natural selection to make male and female cells and bring them together. There are good genetic reasons that apply in most flowers, though not all, for making sure that they don't mate with themselves. It would be all too easy for a flower to mate with itself. It's got pollen and a stigma in the same physical flower. And they use bees, butterflies, hummingbirds and other pollinators to transport the pollen from one flower to another. The usual way to do this is to bribe them with nectar. Here you see a hummingbird feeding from a flower with nectar. The bright colours are like Piccadilly Circus. It's an advertisement telling the hummingbirds or bees to come and feed from here. Now, nectar is made specially for the purpose, and it's costly. And there are some flowers that get away without producing nectar, like this orchid. This is a hammerhead orchid. It mimics a wasp, and a wasp comes and thinks that it's a female wasp and tries to mate with it. There's a very spectacular hinge there that you'll see the use of. There are the pollen sacs, there are the pollinia, and there's the hinge, and there's the fake female. Now look what's happened. The male bee's come and been dashed onto the pollen there. It's going back and forth on that hinge, banging away. And sooner or later, the pollen sacs will come off onto his back. There he is now with his back there, and there are the pollen sacs on his back. And he flies off, and then he'll mate with another flower, and just the same thing will happen. This is a bucket orchid. An even more ingenious trick it uses. It's dropping fluid into the bucket there. This is an attractive fluid. There's a special kind of green bee which is attracted by that fluid. It comes to the flower, and it falls into the bucket. There. It's trapped there. The only way it can get out is through a special hole that's provided for it by the orchid. There's the hole. It's the only way out, and the bee has found it. It's forced out through that hole, and on its way out, there is the pollen sac waiting. So the only way through is this little passage. There are the pollen sacs, and it's going to get straight off onto the bee's back on the way out. Now that same bee, when it finally escapes with the pollen sacs on its back, is going to fly off, and it will eventually come to another bucket orchid, and exactly the same procedure will be repeated. It'll nearly drown, it'll find the hole, and on its way out, the pollen sacs will in this case be scraped off, and they will fertilize the next orchid. So this is deceiving bees, but again using their wings to carry pollen about. The pollination services offered by bees are truly massive. Somebody in Germany calculated that in Germany alone, honeybees pollinated about 10 trillion flowers in the course of a single summer day. It's also been calculated that about 30% of all human foods depend upon bee pollination. If bees were wiped out, 30% of our food plants would be wiped out as well. The world of bees is totally dominated by flowers. I don't just mean honeybees. There are lots and lots of species of bees. Many of them are solitary, not living in hives. The larvae of bees are almost all fed on pollen. I've got lots of flowers. Would anybody like to come and investigate the pollen here? Yes, please. Now, if you'd like to just come and sniff on it, try sniffing that one there. Get your nose well into it. That's right. Get well in there. That's right. Now what's your name? Richard. Richard. Let's have a look at Richard's nose. You can see the pollen all over it there. Now, if he were to go and do that to another flower, we see another one? No, let's not bother about that. Thank you very much, Richard. So that's what bees are doing millions of times over every day. They feed their larvae on it. Their aviation fuel is nectar, and that's entirely provided for them by flowers. They work hard for their nectar reward. To make a 1-pound jar of honey, it's been worked out that bees would have to visit about 10 million clover blossoms. So flowers use bees, and bees use flowers. Both sides in the partnership have been shaped by the other. Both sides, in a way, have been domesticated, cultivated by the other. The ultraviolet garden is a two-way garden. But just because flowers and bees have evolved towards partnership, we mustn't assume that creatures in general work in a friendly way for one another's good. There are people who think that antelopes are there for the benefit of lions, and indeed that lions are there for the benefit of antelopes to keep their population down. And that's just as much nonsense as the idea that oxen come willingly to the slaughter for the benefit of us. In some ways it might have been better if I talked about bats instead of about bees and flowers, because bats have no interest in the welfare of the insects that they eat. They just want to eat them. And the flies have no interest in the welfare of bats. They'd be happy if there weren't any more bats. So although partnerships like bees and flowers are quite common, unpartnerships like bats and flies are far more common. And as a matter of fact, bats provide us another fine lesson, similar to the ultraviolet garden, because of course they have an even more different perspective on the world than bees do. If this bat were flying about, it would be making little cries which we couldn't hear. There we are. Now we can't hear those, but this is a bat detector. It's an instrument that brings the bat cries down into our world. So those are echolocation cries. That bat is now getting a picture of the world, a picture of Bryson's face. It's aiming up Bryson's neck towards his ear. Provide an extra earring. Right, thank you very much, Bryson. And the bat. So if the world looks different to a bee because of its ultraviolet vision, how much more different must the world look to a bat, since it sees through its ears? Now, when we say something like flowers use bees for their purposes, or bats use flies for their purposes, what are we really saying? What are flowers and bees, hummingbirds and bats really for? Well, this is a profound question, and it's one that I want to turn to now. And I want to begin with a computer demonstration. So I have first of all to insert this disk into here.
Virus alert. Virus alert. This disk is infected. Virus alert. Virus alert. This disk is infected.
How do I get it out?
Virus alert.
Right, well, that, as you may have guessed, was in fact a fake. But it might not have been. Computer viruses are a real menace. But what is a computer virus? Well, it's just a program like any other. It's written by somebody. It's a very simple program. Unlike, say, a word processor that does something clever and sophisticated, a virus program just does one thing. It just says one thing. It says, copy me and spread me around. Now, because computer users are always spreading their disks around, a program that says copy me, begin, copy me, end, when it passes through one computer and makes lots of copies, the disk gets spread to other people, and then it gets spread to other people. And so sooner or later the whole country becomes filled with disks, with programs that all say copy me. It just works automatically and without realizing what it's doing. A pointless sort of program. Of course it's pointless. But it's irrelevant that it's pointless. It spreads because it spreads, because it spreads, because it spreads. Why shouldn't it spread? Since computers do exactly what they're told, and the virus tells it to spread itself around. The fact that it does nothing useful on the way, may even do harm, is neither here nor there. Real viruses that cause diseases like flu are very much the same kind of thing.